Right now, let's bring in Kyle Bonagura, ESPN, because if you're just joining us, the Pac-2, Oregon State, Washington State have added 4 schools today: San Diego State, Colorado State, Fresno State, Boise State. Here's Kyle. Hey, why was this the best move for the Pac-2 at this point, Kyle?
Yeah, so I think it was a process in determining like what the options were, right? And so I think the process was actually pretty straightforward. It's one, can you get a slot in the Big 12 first? That it became pretty clear that wasn't going to be possible, and maybe you wait around for ACC implosion, and maybe that leads to something down the line that would require a lot of patience and no guarantees, right? And so moving beyond that, there's only so many options, right? The Mountain West obviously made a lot of sense just to be affiliated in some way. But I think, ultimately the chance to rebuild the Pac-12, keep the branding, keep the infrastructure of Pac-12 Enterprises, the kind of the shell of the Pac-12 network to do game production on your own as a way to market the conference to streaming platforms was there's real value there. And then by moving over some top brands from the Mountain West, you create a conference that's stronger than if you were just to kind of, okay, we're just going to go join the Mountain West and be, and just add to the 12 teams that they already had. So you're not going to get weighed down by the teams at the bottom of the Mountain West like you would have been if you just had joined that conference. And so once they made the determination that all the cost of doing this, the exit fees, it's $18 million per school, and the poaching penalty that they'll have to pay the Mountain West, which was drawn up in the scheduling agreement that they came to for this year. It's a lot of money. It's over $100 million just to get to 6. But look, you have to assume that they studied it and had conversations with media partners and trying to figure out what the value would be, and ultimately decided that long term that type of investment was going to be worth it.
So you bought the Mountain West, you just added leather seats and like a sunroof, basically. I mean,
it's more like it feels like I've been telling everyone this. It feels like promotion relegation in soccer, right? It's you're the bottom tier at a top tier conference, and now you're the top tier at a rung down the ladder, and then you're going to get rid of the bottom of that rung, and luckily you don't have to add anyone to that from the bottom to backfill. But yeah, it's better than if they would have joined the Mountain West. It's not as good as if they would have joined the Big 12, and just in terms of media value. But I actually think lifestyle and cultural fit and access to the college football playoff is a big part of this. For fans, for me, this is a better experience actually for Oregon State and Washington State than if they had joined the Big 12, because then you're kind of where you were before, right? You're not at the top in terms of resources and ability to consistently compete every year. You're certainly going to have the years where you're competing for conference titles, but it's not going to be the regular expectation. In this version of the Pac-12, Oregon State and Washington State can genuinely expect to compete for conference titles every year, which sounds really good, right? If you're a fan of either school, you have a chance to go from rooting for a football team that is, has the whole range of possibilities from bad to mediocre to good. Now, every year you kind of go in, at least with the starting the fall with the expectation to watch a good team.
This is Kyle Bonagura of ESPN. So it sounded like Scott Barnes said today they want to get to 9 so they can play an 8-game conference schedule, 4 non-con games. The Mountain West currently gets $6 million a year in their media deal. What do you think if they get to 9, depending on who those other schools are, what do you think they could command for a media deal in this new Pac-12?
Yeah, so I've heard a lot of numbers floated around, and I guess the disclaimer here is that we'll see. But Jeremiah Dickey, the AD at Boise State, I talked with him earlier today. I mentioned 10 is does 10 feel like the right starting point from what you've heard? And he said, yeah, maybe 10, 11, 12, 13, somewhere in that range, right? Depending on who they get, right? If you get Memphis and Tulane, you have a couple of other big media markets, maybe that's more beneficial than adding Utah State or Air Force or something, right? So I think there'll be some wiggle room at the back end based on who else joins the conference. But yeah, I think it'll be roughly double of what the Mountain West distributes now is I think a fair expectation where things will start. And then, beyond that, It really is a wait and see.
Yeah, I don't know if people fully appreciate how little money there is in the group of five. Like the Mountain West pays out $4 million for the lower schools, and then Boise, because of and like some incentive bonuses, they make like 5 or 6. So it is shocking when you hear the numbers between the haves and the have-nots.
Oh, absolutely. It's just a different tier of football. And it's one of the reasons I've been an advocate for a long time of like having a separate playoff for the group of 5 level teams. Like you have FCS playoffs, you have Division II playoffs, you have Division III playoffs. Now you have a 12-team playoff for FBS, but still like 130 teams where like the caliber of athletic department in however you want to measure it is so different from the top to bottom. It feels like there's a real like there should be like another tier in between, and there is like in terminology, group of 5, power 4 now, I guess. But yeah, I think they're operating on completely different planes. I think at least now with 12, you have playoff access, and at least you can kind of hope to get a bid to the playoff. I still think it's like unreasonable for those level schools to like want to be like the champion at the end of the college football season, like if we're being real, right? So it just feels weird. Any like competitive structure where like at the start of the year like your odds of being the champion at the end are like not really like realistic is, for me, has always felt like a weird competitive structure.
Yeah, it's weird because when we talk to fans, like even though they know that, it's hard for them to go from, I don't think it's hard for the Boise States of the world, but I think it's hard for Washington State fan and Oregon State fan to accept that reality. I think that's, and maybe it's something you get used to, but I'm with you. I think the idea of being Boise State isn't that bad. I just think that's a hard bridge for some of those fans to cross, at least from what we hear.
No, that's right. And I mean, I went to Washington State, right? So like just like the identity in Pullman, it's very similar in Corvallis. I visited Corvallis a few weeks ago. Look, it's over 100 years where these small college towns have this connection to this major college athletic conference, right? You have these 2 outliers, these college towns in a league of metropolitan universities, right? And so yeah, it's a pride thing to a certain degree that, hey, like we're a Pac-12 school, we're a Pac-10 school before that, right? Like we compete at the highest level of collegiate athletics, and that's a source of pride, and it's cool, and it's good. It's fun to be able to have those big games, especially when your team's good and you're feeling nationally relevant. You're putting your town on the map in a way that's like really unique and fun. Like that's going to be different in this league, right? But at the same time, I think, you're winning 8, 9, 10 games every year. You're not having the spells where you go a decade of being irrelevant. Like, I don't know that. Like, I feel like it shouldn't be that hard to embrace it once it starts. Because like the alternative is just like you don't embrace it and you're not a fan anymore. And like, okay, you're going to give up your fandom of your school or the team you're a fan of for whatever reason, just because like you're no longer playing in the same league as USC. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like people are resilient enough to like understand that dynamics change, and it's still going to be a fun experience to go to Reser, go to Martin Stadium and watch these teams play.
So why did they add these 4 schools specifically? I mean, there's the other teams in the Mountain West, like UNLV looks more interesting, at least to me, than say Colorado State. So why these 4 specifically, and why not more Mountain West schools? Would they be leaving the door open then for maybe some ACC defections, or how how do they backfill?
Yeah, so I think the most surprising part of this for me is it was 4, not 5, and like I'm in agreement. Like I think UNLV has a lot to offer. They check all the boxes. It's a place people want to go visit, right? It's a great away game. They've got they play in the NFL stadium. They built a new football facility. Basketball's got real history there. So I think it's becoming more of a sports town as gambling has been legalized, right? So there's a lot like people are embracing that part of like fandom in sports. So yeah, like I was surprised by that, but I also would be surprised if it doesn't happen eventually. I still think you still got to get to 8. And like you said, 9 makes a lot of sense. And so UNLV is clearly the most desirable team, in the Western part of the country, to add. I mean, outside of Cal and Stanford, which that's a whole nother story of them in the ACC, which is kind of a non-starter for now. So yeah, I think eventually UNLV makes its way across as well. I think one thing to keep an eye on, and maybe this is the strategy here, is that it's not a guarantee that they or any other Mountain West teams that come in would come in at the same share, right? Because like what happened today is the Mountain West, was kneecapped, right? Their long-term value is not the same as it was 2 days ago, and so their next media rights deal won't be as good, and so the discrepancy between what the Mountain West has been paying out now and what it will be in the future is not the same, right? We saw that how it worked in the Pac-12, or what it's going to be in the Pac-12, right? It was a big hit, and so now the Pac-12 has some negotiating leverage with adding a school like UNLV, and maybe they decide, look, like we'd love to have you, UNLV in, and you'll be happy to come over for 60% or whatever the number might be, some sort of percentage of the full share, because I think they want to, like, that's just operating from a position of strength, and that's just how college sports works. And I think they'll have to see like what other interests they get from schools in the ACC or elsewhere, or kind of get a sense of what the appetite's going to be for other schools to hop in.
That makes total sense that you can play some hardball. And I would also assume that, because every conference has to do this, you have to be careful. The more you split the pie, the more money you have to bring in. And let's be honest, this isn't going to be a huge financial windfall with a TV deal. So I'm guessing that this is a pretty thin margin that they're operating with, negotiating a TV deal and adding more schools where you have to slice the pie.
No, absolutely. And see, I mean, this is a whole new world, right? I think the addition of streamers changes the game as well, right? Like it's a very unique spot, one, to regrow a conference like this. With football, we've seen it, with like schools like or conferences like the WAC and some other places, but like in this climate, we haven't seen it done before. So I think it's going to be a pretty instructive process about like how these schools are valued by these companies.
Interesting times. Hey, Kyle, thanks for the time today. We appreciate it, and keep up the good work.
Thanks, guys.
Kyle Bonagura, he is a staff writer at ESPN.
Go Cougs, right?
Yeah, and a Coug. Yeah. You freaking Coug. He's pretty optimistic with it.
Yeah.
By the way, for those wondering about Cal and Stanford, we'll get more into that with Brett McMurphy, who's going to join us at 5:15. But it doesn't sound like Cal and Stanford are an option right now.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting that, because no one really can predict what's going to happen with the ACC, but once the ACC crumbles, which many think it might.
Sure.
But we just don't know when that. Like the Pac-12 couldn't sit and wait for that.
No. Does that open up the?
Does that then open up the backfill to the?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about Cal and Stanford. I would imagine Cal and Stanford would want to get back out west.
Because remember, like this all depends on if the ACC were to lose their grant of rights. Because
exactly,
and for anyone asking about, like someone brought up like Utah, no one's coming back from there. The Big 12 is already 30+ million, and with more money coming in, you're looking at your TV deal probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 million. No one's coming back. So that's.
Well, Cal and Stanford could
possible
if the ACC crumbles and they have nowhere else to go.
Yes,
and they get back out west. They're way out east now. That is of all of the conference realignment crap that's happened. Yeah. Cal and Stanford being in the ACC is one that I still can't wrap my head around.
But this idea of any of the Arizona schools or Utah or certainly stop.
I don't even know why that was brought up.
Yeah.